It's Nobody Asked Us with Des and Kara. My name is Kara Goucher, and I'm joined by Des Linden. Des, how are you today?
I'm doing great. That was a phenomenal intro. I think every week we get a little bit better. So kudos. Thanks for
Yeah,
raising the
just so
bar.
everyone knows, right before we hit record, I was told that Des absolutely nailed the intro last week and it put a lot of pressure on me. And I was told I need to go back and listen to it. So I will have to do that later on. Des is the
No,
super profesh when it comes to the
to saying
intro.
my name.
You're really good at it. Okay, well,
Thanks.
I'm super excited today because we're going to talk about your book, Choosing to Run, which here I got this kind of
Ooh.
advanced copy. And I have to tell you that I started putting sticky notes at the beginning because there's so many things that I like related to and loved. And then I was like, this is actually annoying and I'm not even enjoying the book. And so then I stopped sticky noting and just enjoyed the book. But I just have to say, because we're going to talk about it today, but I just want to say how much I loved your book. I love how you laid it out. It was so creative with being in the present, running the 2018 Boston Marathon, and then looking back. I love the way it was formatted like that. When you were in the present, I felt like I could feel what you were thinking and feeling. And I just like really, really loved this book. So I know you probably are uncomfortable with, a little love or a compliment, but it is so, so good. And I'm really excited that we get to talk about it today.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah. My tactic, I generally deflect. I'm like, well, all the credit to Bonnie. I was just out there putting one foot in front of the other. And then she made it super interesting.
right. Well, let's talk about that because it's not just Bonnie. Obviously, Bonnie is an amazing writer, but it's your story and what you lived through. So, what I really want to know is when did you even first start thinking about writing a book?
It was really closely after the race, to be honest, because there's this element that nobody really knew. And I think I've talked about the Boston win so much, but there's this whole behind the scenes thing. And it was like all of these emotions at the finish line, you got a picture, but it didn't truly get described. So it was something we started thinking about pretty quickly after that race, and then just figuring out the right timing to actually do it.
And when you say we, who's we?
Myself and Josh for the most part, and it was something I talked to Ryan about. That was kind of like the close knit crew at that time,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like there's this story here that people are only seeing a portion of, and it'll be really great to tell the rest of it. I think there's this finish line hug where it's the three of us, and people are like, "That is so weird. Like, why does this mean so much to her agent?" Like, it was just there's more to that like moment, and it was really like obviously Ryan and I had our hug and our time as well, but it was this sort of team effort, and I think the book gets into that.
Yeah, absolutely. We learn a lot about Josh Cox and just how much he's been there for you and believed in you, which is really cool because I know Josh just is like a cool guy to say hi to. And like he's allowed me to bounce ideas off him here and there. And I remember when he was still racing, but you really get to see a whole nother side of him in this book and just how important he is in your life. You got Bonnie Ford as your co author, and she is one of the best writers of track and field and specifically women in track and field. How did that happen?
Yeah, she is someone I did an interview with right after the race, and I was like, "Oh, there's so much more here, and I hope to talk about it one day." So we were already kind of thinking about that, and she was the first person we approached within maybe a month of that race. In her contract with ESPN, she was like, "Let me find out. I'm going to see if this works." And she came back and was like, I can't do it per my contract." Um, and we were kind of crushed because I had a really good history with Bonnie. She had covered me in 2011, so that kind of went back away. And it wasn't going to be a thing where you had to teach someone the sport or she didn't necessarily understand it. Like starting from the beginning, we had rapport, and so we kind of pitched the idea of like, when do you think you're going to be done with this contract, and would you still be interested at that point? And she chewed on it for a bit and was like, I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes. And then Josh and I are like, let's just pause until she can say yes if, that's something she wants to do. So it was kind of like a wait it out and see if she's still interested um, when the time was right. And unfortunately, she was.
So you didn't go talk to anyone else. You were just like, I want Bonnie Ford, and I'm just going to wait and see if she can make this happen.
Pretty much. Yeah. And
I love that.
I consider, like, I was like, maybe I can do this myself. And I kind of hemmed and hawed with that for a while. And I was like, it's just too much work. Like, I think I could write a good book. Like, I think it would be good and the stories would be interesting. And like, just we're in a place where we do really interesting things. I think Bonnie is someone who could make it great. Like, she could take those stories and like make them take that next step. So it was gonna be her, or else I would write it myself one day, maybe, or maybe not.
So when Bonnie finally was able to, when was that? And then did you guys start pitching the book to different publishers at that point?
Yeah, it was around. I don't want to put an exact time on it because I don't know the ins and outs of her contract, but it was pandemic time, I'm pretty sure, and we just both had a lot of free time on our plate. Um, I was able to get in touch with a great agency through a friend, and they were stoked on it, and they really helped us with the proposal. We put together, you know, great proposal, sample chapter, and then we actually wrote a lot of the race chapters at that time. So it was really meaty. Um, and then handed it over to the agency, and they started pitching. I want to say January 21.
So you've worked on it. I mean, it's a long time coming. You had the idea at the end of, the beginning, the spring of 2018. You start working on it. You get a deal in 2021. And then what was that like the next couple of years? Did you feel pressure to meet deadlines? Did you have to reread it a million times? Were you like, why are you asking me to reread this again? Like, what was that whole process like?
Yeah, it was it's wild how much work it is. Like, I think back, like, I could maybe do this myself. There's no way. And I say that confidently now, like, there's just no way. I'm like super picky as well, so I was very fortunate that Bonnie put up with a lot of my shit. But as we started working on it, I was like, oh, she's very particular as well, and we're gonna really just squeeze this thing and get the right words. So it was, I never felt especially pressured with drafts and things like that. We were pretty good on time. And our editor, is one of the most optimistic people I've ever met in my entire life. So I never felt like she was going to be like, yo, where's your work? She'd be like, don't worry about it. Like, when you're ready, give me 2 chapters, or, because we would have things in the works, and it's just like, well, these 3 things are almost done, but none of them are done yet. And she'd be like, don't sweat it. Just get them when you're ready. And then like have way too many exclamation points, except she like is actually like that. So I'm like, no, she's like, this is cool. So yeah, it was a great process all around. I just felt like I had the right people in my corner, and it allowed Bonnie and I to work the way we needed to work and not feel like, well, I haven't seen this in a while. So that was good.
And when were you done with the final copy, the final revision? There's, I so many times they were like, this is the final copy. And then they'd be like, well, you have 2 more weeks, and it went on and on and on. But finally, there was a point where it was the final copy and no changes could be made. When was that for you?
Yeah, that process is crazy. Like, the editing process is crazy. And I know you're laughing because you went through the exact same thing. And there's so many different hands that it goes through, and eyes that have like see it and go like, well, actually this isn't quite right. And then they give you all the feedback. So we did a ton of edits, and we started getting galleys out to other folks for reviews. And then they started to going to running specific like bloggers and podcasters and things like that. And it was like 2 months ago, I got an email, and Allison Wade was like, hey, I think that there's a like little error in this course description. Like, she has them possibly backwards. Um, and I was like, F, like, are you kidding me? Like, we've just like made sure everything's dead nuts on. And I was like, I looked at it, and she was right. And sure enough, and I was like, do we have time to edit? And they're like, if you can get it back by the end of the day. Um, and that was like 2 months ago.
Oh
So
my
we
God.
got the edit, and they were like, we're printing like today or whatever. So we got it done.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Well, good job.
right up to the finish
Good
line.
job, Allison. Way to catch
Yeah,
that.
seriously.
Okay, I do want to ask one thing because I'm obsessed with how the book is laid out. Was that your idea? Was that Bonnie's idea? Did you guys come to that together? Like, how did you decide to not go chronological, but to weave the 2018 Boston Marathon throughout your life?
That was something I felt pretty strongly about, and Bonnie was like, "Yeah, that's cool. Like, we can make this work." And I did a lot of the structuring on that, and at the end, we were really happy with how it really dovetailed quite nicely in the final few chapters. But if you're doing like a speaking engagement or something, you have to like spend all this time talking about your life, and then teeing up these lessons, and then I would get to the Boston thing, and everyone's like, I just want to hear about that. That's the
Yeah.
compelling part, and that's where all the questions are. And so for the book, it was this opportunity to be like, let's make that the engaging section that um, keeps popping up, that you're looking forward to. You're not like you drag through the rest, but there's always that strong race presence that is waiting for you after the life story section. So, and I've seen that done a few times. Like I remember saying to someone, like, I want it to be like Seabiscuit, and not in the quality, because that book's like amazing, but I was like, those race stories are so compelling. You're like, I can't wait to get to the next. And then you read some history on horse racing, and then you're like, oh, this is so. I know it works. It was just if we could get it to work, and I think we did.
Yeah, you totally did. I loved how it was laid out so much. Like right away when I started reading it, I was like, this is so clever. And I loved how you would learn something about you and then you go back into that moment. And it seemed like it felt so real. Like I could just feel what you were feeling. It was just awesome. I love that you guys decided to do it that way instead of waiting till the end.
Right.
I thought it was really cool.
Thanks.
So let's talk about it. So I love this book. Obviously, I keep gushing about it. But when you're writing your own autobiography or a memoir, you have to revisit some things from the past that aren't always fun. And so I'm wondering how you felt. Like, how does your dad feel reading the book? Obviously, he loves you, but you talk about how he could be kind of hard on you. And was that hard for you to talk about that? And how is it for him? Is he like, thanks a lot, Des?
But my dad has not read the book yet. So there's a little level of stress there, I'm sure. I don't think he'll be unaware. I think he remembers my childhood. We have a crazy complicated relationship. My parents have their own relationship that it's their thing, and they kind of have their own patterns, and I'm not there to tell them how to live. And so, we kind of coexist, and then check in with each other um, as often as we need to. And so I think he'll probably be sad to a degree. He'll probably feel those moments, and um, I think he's at the age where he probably will look back and be like, I wish I had done this different or that different. But I think we saw the growth in the relationship throughout the book, and there's points where it
Mm-hmm.
was like, I understand him, and I understand that all the decisions he made for me and my sister were like, you go to the source. Like, is he doing this because he's a bad guy? Is he doing this because he hates me? And it's like, no, he's because he loves me and he wants something more for me. Um, and we might disagree on whether or not that was the right way to get there, but at the source, it came from a place of love, and I understand that. And um, he's it's like your family. You're like, you just,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, you love them. And then there was a lot from that I learned, like, okay, you're not my family, and I'm feeling these trends and these patterns, and yes, from my blood, I'll work it out, and we'll deal, and we'll have our relationship and solve it. But I also, if you're not my family, like, I'm way less inclined to deal with it.
Yeah. You share, and part of one of the chapters, you talk about how after, I think it was 2012, and you were injured, and your dad was really worried about you. And he was saying, like, you don't have to keep doing this. And so I thought that was really touching to see, I don't know your dad. I've never met your dad, but I appreciate you sharing honestly, because I feel like that stuff is important. It helps um, mold who we become. But I do feel like throughout the book, you got an understanding of the why he was sometimes the way he was. It really was because he wanted you to have a good life, and he was so proud of you. I remember the race when he was like, you beat them all and stuff. Like, it's just, I don't know, but it is tough, right? It's tough. You're talking about things that impacted your life, and sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's what makes books really good. I mean, this is from yours as well. It's like if you just put everything in a box with the bow on it and be like, oh, it was like perfect, and like then the reader's like, this isn't. I don't believe this. So
Right.
you have to put the good with the bad in there. I think that's what makes it real.
For sure. One of the things I learned from your book that totally interested me was that you were a psychology major.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, if being a psychology major, do you think that that has helped you in your athletic career? Or do you feel like, no, that was just some classes I took in college?
100%. I think it helped. I remember being on a Alley on the Run, Alley Feller, Alley on the Run podcast. And she was like asking me about that. She asked me sort of that question, like in a joking way. And I was like, look, everyone at the highest level is looking for their 1%. And some people find it in like shaving pounds or like, putting the moon boots on for a couple extra hours. And like, I think the psychology side, the mental side of the sport is so important. Like that to me was always the 1%, like figuring out how to believe in myself, trusting the work, trusting what I was doing, learning how to manage pain, all of those things. I think if you look for it in the literature and in the textbooks, it's there. It's just shifting it to your path in life. And so I think it was super helpful, and it's something that I'm like still very much interested in. So it wouldn't be rare for me to pick up a sports psychology book and be like, oh, like this is super helpful. And I think it's a thing you can always be learning from. So how about you? You're psych as well. What do you
Yeah,
feel
I was a
your
psych
feelings on that?
major.
You're
Yeah,
like,
I,
nah.
I think it did help me.
Yeah.
Well, what's funny is I always thought psychology was really easy because I would just think about people in my life and I'd be like, oh, that describes them. Yep, I know that. And so I loved studying psychology because I felt like it came easy. I knew all of the things about psychology, but I always still struggled mentally. So I don't know if being a psychology major helped me or not. I still had to have someone else that I was talking to. Like you're saying, you would read books. I still needed someone to quiet the voices in my head. Did you ever meet with a sports psychologist?
I did not in a formal way. One of my very good friends, who's mentioned in the book, Cody Sohn, now Cody Mitchell, is a sports psych. And so when I'm really struggling, I'll bounce ideas off of her. And then my sister is actually a family psychologist. So she kind of helps without necessarily going to someone. So I have those just resources that are helpful. And then it's a lot of self study.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. That's really cool. I love how, you didn't have the Foot Locker experience or the NCAA championship experience, but you decided to keep moving forward with the sport. But I have to tell you, one of the things that shocked me the most, and I think I texted you this, you didn't work at the Hanson store?
I did not. No. When I started, I was like, I had to like beg to be on, not beg, but like I wasn't. They had an A standard and a B standard, and if you had the A standard, like you got a job, um, you got insurance with the job, you got free housing, all these different things. But if you were the B standard, you paid $200 to live in the house. You had to find your own job. Like you just didn't get all the perks. And then eventually, like I earned the A standard, but I was like paying rent when I first got there, like $200 a month, which is a super great deal. But I did not work in the stores; they were too full when I got there, and I didn't have the A standard, so I found work
I
elsewhere.
was legit shocked reading that. And
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? She didn't live in, like, she didn't work at the store. And I had no idea you paid rent either. Um, you worked at Moose Jaw, right?
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with any of your coworkers from back in that time?
That's so funny. I am. One of my really good friends stood up in my wedding, was a photographer. She was customer service with me for a while, and she was a photographer later. I saw her and her husband and their little boy, Howie, just like in December, maybe even January. Um, and yeah, it's great because it's like haven't missed a beat, and it was such a unique group of people. Like they were just so fun, and some of the things that like it was like normal people, and then they're hippies on top of it. So I don't know what kind of drugs they were doing, but it was like vicariously like having fun through them. Like I'd go and sip a beer and I'd be like, they're like fucked up. Um, and I just, like it didn't worry about running when I was at Mushta. So it was an awesome, awesome place. But my friend Katie, who I'm still in touch with, she was the least hippie psychedelic of the crew. So I feel like maybe that's why we meshed pretty well.
When were you able to not work at Moose Jaw? Like you had enough money, your contract was big enough that you didn't have to work there anymore. Not that it was bad because you describe it as fun and it helped you out separate running and stuff. But
Yeah.
when were you like, okay, I actually don't have to work here anymore?
I probably could have quit a bit earlier, but I worked after the 2011 Boston. I was second, and like a couple days later, went into the office. Like everyone would get up and cheer, and then they'd be like, "All right, here's your shit, go to work." But you'd get into the summer months, like so that was spring. You'd get into the summer months, and there just wouldn't be enough like volume to be in the office. They'd be like, "Hey, you want to go home early?" Like, "Oh, okay, sure." And then I was literally just like, I don't need to be in there and I don't need the money. And they're just sending me home early anyways. So just stop putting me on the schedule. But now it was a really fun place to work. And I didn't put the story in there, but I'm going to tell it because I love it. But before, I think Houston 2010, maybe 2011, um it was the Christmas season and we like the power went out there, and so we did email customer service, and so they set up all these generators inside, and they brought in like these barrel heaters. So it was like an open flame in this building, and they would power up all the computers and be like, start writing emails. Like, so we're replying to these customers that are just pissed because like their Denali jacket's not going to make it on time, and you've ruined Christmas. And I was just bananas. And so like we had to work around the clock, but it would be like I would typically work, 11 to 5 in the afternoon, be leaving the office, and the manager would be like, "Hey, can you come back at midnight to 5 in the morning?" And you like couldn't say no. So you'd come back midnight to 5 in the morning. I was doing that like around the clock before that Houston half race, and then I raced really well. I was like, "Oh, thank God I didn't like totally screw it up." But yeah, it was a fun vibe, but it was wild. Like you would do dumb stuff like that.
I mean, I think I love this part of your story because when you got second at the Boston Marathon, if you had told me, well, Des has to get back home because she has to go to work, I would have been like, bullshit, right? Like, there's no way. She just got second at Boston. She doesn't work a job like that. And so it really just opened my eyes to just how gritty you are. And another thing I got throughout the book was I know you're an introvert. We literally talked about it for an hour, but you'll probably hate this word because you are who you are, but like you're so brave. Like you take these jobs, you do all this traveling with your sister, you travel around, you like let other athletes into your life, train with them. And I was just really impressed by that. And it's not that I would thought you were like an asshole or something, but it's you really push yourself. And I feel like that came through in the book, not just in running. Obviously, we know in running, but the way you experience cultures and meet people and put yourself out there. It was really cool. And one of the things I loved too was just your relationship with your sister. And so you guys will go and take these crazy trips all over the world. So how did she convince you to do that? And or did you convince her? And now it seems like it's something you guys just do. You go on these amazing adventures together.
Yeah, it's definitely we're both very interested in it from a pretty young age, and I think our bond is so strong because we're so different from our parents, and it's just an interesting thing because again, it's like you love them, and they are the way they are, and I wish at times that my parents were not saying it's, and you're right, brave maybe isn't the word in this case, but like more adventurous, that they might try new things, but they're just like sort of bubble people. And so I feel like sometimes just seeing the way they live, you're like, I want to do something a little bit more. My mom is she's a worrier. So like stay out too late, she's worried, go somewhere different, she's worried. And I think part of that was like, we have to figure out why she's so worried. Like, not that you want to go and put yourself in bad situations, but almost like prove her wrong. Like, no, you can go to India and most people in the world are good. Like, they want to show you around, they're proud of their culture. Um, it's okay. And, we would get these trips set up and then be at the airport. I remember it was, I think before Thailand, we're at the airport in LA and we hadn't said anything. So we just took a picture of us with the like travel book. And we're like, all right, see you in a week, mom. Cause she would just, like if she knew about it, she'd be bugging us every single day. Like, I think we were going to Tulum a couple years ago in Mexico, and she started sending us articles about like gang wars in Tulum and like there's been shootings. I'm like, it's fine, mom. Like, it'll be okay. So there's a little bit of like, just wanting to prove that it's not all bad out there. And so far, it's not all been bad.
Yeah. I just think it's a different side of you that people don't know about. You are really adventurous and you really like take things in. And it was cool to see that. I do want to talk a little bit about the 2011 Boston Marathon. And we've talked about it on our podcast, but I think what you got across in the book so well was just how, even though it was so amazing, it was so hard. And you really felt like that was your one chance and you had let it slip away. So just tell us a little bit pre-race what your thinking was. I mean, you were confident that you could do something special, and then kind of going through that whole moment and then the aftermath.
Yeah, if a buildup could be perfect, I hit every split, right on, but probably 5 seconds faster. We were training for about 2:24 pace. And I remember we got to the last workout, which was like, it's like a no brainer. You just go through the motions. And it was a 3x2 mile. We did it in Florida because they would always do heat training in Florida just in case it was warm. And so we did it like at 11 o'clock in the afternoon. It was stupid hot. I was like, there's no scenario where it's going to be this hot in Boston. Like, this is overkill. We're like wasting our time doing this. And I hit the whole thing, but the last mile, I was like 5 seconds slow the last mile. And I was so mad because I had literally the perfect segment up until that mile. And I remember like throwing a fit because I was just like, this is fucking stupid. Like, why would we add something so dramatic this close to the race? And like, I had to sit down with Kevin and Keith. They're like talking me off the ledge. I'm like, I'm not worried about the race. I think we're good. I'm just larger picture. Like, what are we doing? They're like, let's just get your head right. We'll train earlier tomorrow. Like, don't worry about it. So segment wise, it was amazing. And then, race day, that was such a crazy race because Kim Smith went out so hard. And it was a fast day. And, I was like, maybe I totally overestimated myself. Like, these guys are running way faster than I'm ready to run. And I think I just need to like do my own thing here today. So Kim Smith was way out the front. I think there's this really crazy picture where at 15K, like there's this pack. And then I'm like this little dot way behind that looks like she missed the start. Like, wait, I'm on my way. So like at that moment, I'm like, this isn't this. I just said all this stuff and it's not going to happen, but I just need to lock in and do my thing. And then I don't remember when it all started to change, but it was like the script was back on where it was like, I saw Kim Smith had dropped out and I was like, okay, that changes everything. And then I felt like if I could be in the picture, like in contention at 20 miles, 22 miles, then I thought I could run the strongest in over that last section. And it wasn't exactly how I imagined being in the pack at 20, but I ran myself to the pack right around the 20-mile mark. And I was like, oh, game on. This is just like the picture in my head now. And I just need to win, which I've practiced a million times, and you visualize it and you know exactly what it's going to be. And that's pretty much what it was until maybe under the Sitco sign where I was like, well, when I picture this, I don't usually have company. So this is surprising. Like,
Right.
I'm supposed to be ahead by now. And then, it was just racing until the finish line. But the sprint finish was so wild. And I felt like I made the move right when I needed to make the move. And I remember people being like, oh, she went too soon. It's like, I thought that I was good. And then my calves just rebelled. They're like, we're done. we're staying right here. You may not finish. But yeah, it was a fun race.
So when you were training for the race, were you outwardly talking with your coaches about winning? Was that the goal? Because I think that, you know, I knew who you were. I had seen you while I was pregnant. You ran some good races. And I thought, she could be in the mix. But I think that's very different than you thinking like, and believing in yourself and saying, no, I'm coming to win this race.
I remember watching the year before. Did you run in 10?
No, I had a baby in my belly.
Yeah, that's what because this is funny. Well, like I remember watching it and being like, "There's nothing that's happening that I can't do." Like
Yes, I watched that same one and thought that
you're
too.
like, "This is all very doable." And um, I think I ran Chicago that fall and ran 2:26, but it was like just a really rocky build up, and then it was a hot Chicago, and I was like, "I know there's more time there," and then it all starts like just connecting, like the pieces start falling in place. And so when I was picking my spring race, it was pretty late. It was December. And it's like you can go to London and knock off some more time. You're in 2:26. It's hot. Like there's definitely time on the table there. And I was like, no way. We're gonna try to win in Boston. But like I was heavily influenced as well, like just watching Brian Sell race there. And I don't think it was Alan Culpepper and Meb that year. Can't remember what year it was, but then the year you and Ryan Hall both finished on the podium, Brian Sell ran that year, I believe, as well. Ryan and I were like at home 2 days before, like an American's gonna win. Like this is gonna be it's gonna be Kara, it's gonna be Ryan. It could be both of them. Like an American's gonna win. And what if we're at home watching on TV? We could be on Boylston watching at the finish line. We got in the car, we drove out, we watched the race, we cheered on Boylston. We had our heartbreak for you guys just because it was like they're on the stretch, they're in the fight. Like this is like it was historic. It was a big step forward, but it was also like the next thing is right there. So watching that was super inspiring and just I think helped or kept feeding that Boston bug. So it was like, well, yeah, I'm going to go to Boston and try and win because that's what Americans do, and that's what Kara and Ryan went to do, and that's what I should do.
Right. But you came so close, way closer than Ryan or I ever came. And I thought what really struck me in the book was this, like the sadness that followed that. From everybody else's perspective, it was like, holy crap, who is this girl? She just arrived. She just put her name, she just got on the map. But for you, you felt devastated by that result.
I think it's that visualization, and when we initially talked about making the Olympic team, like of course it's going to happen. You knew exactly what that was going to look like, and the self-belief required to even say out loud like I'm trying to win the Boston Marathon, um it's a little bananas. Like you have to just be a little bit bananas, and you buy into it and you believe it every day, and it's act as if you are the thing you're trying to become. And it's like, what does a champion look like? And you do that every single day. And obviously at the end of it, you have the olive laurel wreath on your head. And it was all there. Like it was all there except for 25 steps. And then with that, the championship. And what's crazy is like the difference between first and second is like a universal part. It's crazy.
Right. So what did your coaches say to you after that race? Did you guys like decompress and talk about it? Or was it just like, good job?
Yeah, I'm sure we did. I mean, I think I had a takeaway, and it was just like, the like underpass where it's like the last hill in there's Mount Hereford, but the underpass before there. And it was like the slowest of the last 6 miles. And I was like, I was too slow on that hill. Like if I had been faster there, everyone thought like time the kick different. But I think if I had, put a move in there, maybe I would have had a better fight in the sprint. But at the end of it, it was like, I think we're all just really proud that I backed up what I had said, not just like, oh, of course you believe it, but if you can't do it, who cares? So they were really pleased with that. And then, um, yeah, I mean, I think when you get everything out of yourself and you're just toast at the end, It's like, all right, you should be proud of it. Like, give yourself a little credit.
Yeah. I like in this book, I really like you open up about the way you were feeling. And one of the things that again surprised me was in 2012, you made the Olympic team powerfully. You got second at the trials. You were on the Olympics injured and you had to drop out. And then you're kind of in this funk. Like you said in your book, you even question where you fell on the team because the team was recruiting new talent. And I never would have guessed that you had self doubt, right? Because the Des that I knew and raced against was clutch, always. I mean, fucking A. And those Rio trials when it was you and me, I was like, I'd rather be against anybody else in this moment. So that you sharing your vulnerability, I think is really cool in this book. So tell us a little bit about that time after the Olympics, which you talk about a lot in the book, but just how hard it was and the injuries you were dealing with and the doubts you started to have.
Yeah, I think, man, that was so much of it's tied to the games where you have that thing you're trying to accomplish, and I did it, and then to not feel like I was like I got home and I was like, I don't even feel like I'm a real Olympian. Like people, I wouldn't wear any of the stuff. I didn't want to have, like, I remember picking up my bag at baggage claim in Detroit when we got back, and Summer Sanders was there, and she was like, "Oh, what did you compete in?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't really compete. I was like in the marathon, but and she was like, don't say that. Like, you're an Olympian, be proud." And like, just lost on me. And it's like this icon. So I think so. A lot of it was really tied to that. Whereas like I spent so much time trying to achieve this thing, didn't meet up to the expectations. And now I find out I'm injured, not just like tendonitis, but this thing that's going to take a really long time. Like, do I want to recommit to this sport for 4 more years? And like, I have these personal crisis with running all the time where I'm like, what's the point? Like I like competing. And for a really long time, I didn't love running. And it's something I always have to refine and reevaluate and decide, do I love running, the act of running, like the activity of running, and not the sport, not the competition. Um, because when I started back up after 2012, it was like, I'm not going to be competing and I'm not going to be competitive for a while. So is this sustainable? Is this worth it? Is 2016 something I really want to recommit to? And the only way I was going to be able to do that was to find a way to love running, not competing, but love running. And that's when I went to Kenya for a bit.
Yeah, well, the whole part of you building yourself back, you showed so much patience and you share a lot of that in the book, just the different steps and the long term approach. But one thing I thought was kind of funny was you don't talk about the 2016 trials that much. You're kind of like, yeah, and then there were the trials and I made it. And that, I found that funny because that was your proof that you deserve to be an Olympian, right? Like you had survived that 4 years, you came back and you showed, oh, no, 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 there was no fluke. I am an Olympian and I should be on this team. And in the book, you didn't dive into that too much. Why not?
I don't, I think in my mind, it was like as soon as I took the spot in 12, and then recommitted to actually like, hey, I'm going to do this again, it was always matter of fact. Like if I hadn't made that team, like suicide watch for sure, because it was just never even a possibility in my mind. And I was I always expected to get it done, which is crazy. And I understand that that probably sounds like arrogant as fuck, but that's just
No, it sounds
what was
like you were
always
on a mission.
it was always going to happen, because it always had to happen, because I wanted to be like, no, I went to 2012 to learn to get better for this moment. And I think that that's probably why I glossed over it, because it was like, well, of course it happened. It was always going to happen because I was going to make it happen.
So you get to Rio and you run a great race, a solid race, but you're so disillusioned at the end. And you and Shalane share some moments. And I couldn't even believe it because we didn't know each other was writing a book. And I have basically the same story from 2012 with Shalane. And talk to us a little bit about that feeling of, I don't know what I just raced against. I don't understand what just happened. I have had that feeling, and I talk about it at the 2012 Olympics. And just tell us what that's like when you dedicate so much time and you know the players and you know the game and you feel in the moment, you know that you're not on a level playing field.
Yeah, I love that you wrote that story about 2012. And I think back to my injury, and I don't think I put it in my book, but there was a moment in training where it was like, it just never felt right. And I told Kevin, I'm like, I think we're pushing too hard. Like, I can't hit these splits. I just can't hit these splits. And he's like, if you want a medal at the games, you're going to have to do something that you've never done before. You're going to have to race at a level you've never run before. So you have to at least try and hit these splits. And then you look at the results of that race and it's like, that's not possible. And anytime I feel like I've really pushed myself into the well and had an injury or, a health crisis is because I've been trying to chase something that's not real. And I think you get people who are like, why don't you just make drugs legal for everyone? And like, that's insane to me. Like, it's not, doesn't even, that's a jump, but it's not the point for me running. It's to find out how good I am. And, I think in Rio, I was super, super fit and I felt like I was going to be able to compete. And then it just felt familiar where you're like, this isn't something different. We're doing two different things. And I think I had a really great race. And, like I was proud of that race. I was super proud because I'm like, I know I got everything out of myself. I know what the buildup was. And I think I competed really well globally. And I think these results are going to shuffle. Not that it'll matter, but I think I'm one of the best in the world. And it was validating, but it was also like, what's the point of the Olympics? This is so stupid.
Right. Well, that's the part that's hard. And anyone that hasn't read your book, people in front of you got popped for doing drugs shortly after that. They weren't removed from the Olympic results, which is so frustrating, but they were banned from then on. And so you were right. Like your gut instinct was right. I'm not, I've trained, I know what it takes. You're not even saying I'm the best. You're just saying, I don't understand what's happening here. And you were right. It's probably validation that it doesn't, you can't go back in time, but you were right. What you were witnessing wasn't humanly possible without aid.
It's such a tricky thing because when you're in the sport and you know like what these things look like, you're studying it, you're doing your best to understand it, and usually you get a good grid on it the more often you do the races. Um, it just, yeah, like I think usually it's not even intuition, it's like common sense, like, and then you put in the rumors that you hear and like it's the backpack tweet. You're like, first of all, it's not that offensive, but second of all, I'm right. Like
Right.
there's
Yeah,
probably some type of supplement pill in that backpack. Just a guess. um,
definitely.
but you like I think it's so hard to speak out, so hard to say something without sounding bitter, grumpy, or like I didn't win, so I'm pouting. But it's like when you're in the sport, you usually have a pretty good grid for it. My 2 cents.
Yeah. And again, you were right. So,
Yeah.
na 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 na. She knows what she's talking about. Okay. So, oh my gosh, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but I don't want to keep you forever. So, okay, I'm not going to talk about that. Okay. This is hard. It's in the part that's in Runner's World that's in an excerpt right now. But you talk about kind of the beginning of the end with you and the Hansons. And you handle everything with grace in your book, and you handled everything with grace in real life. But when you first saw on Twitter that you were getting a new teammate, Declan Ritzenhein, and no one had told you and no one had talked to you, and you literally saw it on Twitter, what was that like? Did you just feel, I just want to know how you felt in that moment.
um I felt super disappointed. I mean, and that's, I guess it's not the whole story because we had talked about it and it was like, hey, we're adding these people to the team. Um, and I had always been a really big fan of Dathan. Like I watched his 5,000-meter American record in person. I was like outside the stadium because I couldn't get tickets. Like, but it was an, you know, he was someone that you rooted for, and I think it was always someone that you're like, you hear these rumors, but he wouldn't do anything because he's like super nice. And so I think that report came out, and it was clearly just a sticky situation. Um, and I, the backpack tweet was like my passive aggressive attempt to have a conversation with the brothers. Um, and there was a little bit of deception in my mind. Like, I expressed that I was disappointed at that point. Like I didn't say, hey, don't sign him or whatever. It was just like, this will be interesting if this still happens. And I thought I put my feelings on it out there, but never was like, let's have a conversation, like, which would have been the best thing to do. Um, but I also knew that would mean sitting down and hearing a list of justifications, um, which I don't think I think I would have, that would have ended poorly. So yeah, it was not totally surprising because I had a heads up, but it was surprising that um, it still happened and that neither of us, well, I guess Kevin and Keith, and like we couldn't have a conversation and just discuss the ins and outs of it and what it meant. Um, yeah, so that was a little disappointing.
I think my mind was so blown about your buildup for the 2018 marathon. And there's so many things that I want to address. So, by the way, I wanted to talk to you about the thyroid thing, but I don't want to get into it because we don't have time. So, if you have a thought on that, she covers it extensively. But your buildup for 2018, I couldn't believe how alone you were. And you
Yeah.
didn't have your coaches in your corner and you didn't have teammates in your corner. And I had no idea that it had been like that. And I just was reading it and just felt sadness that this is a marathon you love so much. This is a team that you had, a couple times thought about, should I move on? And then you were like, no, I'm loyal. They got me where I am. I'm going to be here. But in that lead up, you were totally on your own. And it seemed like in the book, you were kind of just making up your own training.
Yeah.
Is that
I
true?
mean,
Yeah.
I was definitely putting it together, and a lot of it was going by feel, and this is what I've done in the past, but this is what I don't like about what I was doing in the past, and this is what I think I need now. It was solo. I was in Phoenix, but I felt like that was a point in my career where I realized that my team was not necessarily about like a colorway or living in Michigan.
Right.
It was about the collection of mentors and people in the industry who were in my corner, that I had built along the way. And I realized that I had some really amazing people in my corner and really great connections. And, I was at John Ball, who's my physio, quite often, and he's a friend. I consider him a friend. And, folks that I had met out in Kenya had just happened to be in town, and it was like, you don't miss a beat. Like, let's connect, let's go run. Um, Josh became more important. Ryan obviously was super important. And MK, she's someone I can bounce ideas off of all the time. So it was solo, but it was also like those people were there, and so it never really felt like I didn't have a team. It felt like a different team.
But were your coaches checking in on you and asking you how workouts were going? Or were you just with your new team that you went out and made?
I mean, I was writing all my own stuff. They at one point, I was like, don't send me a schedule. I didn't really want to be too mixed up with it. And I was just like, don't send me a schedule. And then Kevin sent me a schedule. It was like, hey, I just like, it was sort of like, I'm sure it came from the heart, but it was like, I just don't want you to not know what to do. So I'm sending you what we're doing so that you can have guidance. And I was just, so again, this is the thing I didn't handle with poise, but I was like, don't, like, I specifically asked you not to send me a schedule because I'm not doing this because I'm fine. I can do this on my own. It was, I think, a lot of proving to myself that I would be okay on my own.
The more I read about everything leading up to that day, the more I couldn't believe that you even started. So you're alone on your buildup. You have people that care about you, but you're not with your team. You were thinking about being done, like this is it. I could be done now. The pressure of the press conference where you got asked, you knew they were going to ask you about Dathan joining the team. You answer it honestly. Then you're worried. You have all this stress about, I might lose my contract. I mean, the energy that was taken it's incredible. I mean, it's just incredible that you were even able to go and run that race during that time when you're at the press conference and then you're stressing that you immediately told Josh, hey, I got asked about this and I said this. You had to be just so stressed inside. And how did you put that aside and still get up and get on the bus and go out to the start line?
I think it was a weird, I don't like the word blessing in disguise, but I'm going to go with it because the race had been so important and it meant so much and I was so close and had been the centerpiece for so long in what I was trying to accomplish. And I think all of those things prior, I was like, I don't care. I'm s- I'm done. I'm going to do what I need to do tomorrow and then I can walk away and just find the next thing, or whatever, like run out my contract with turkey trot races or whatever's every 10 months or whatever it is. Um, and like, I think it took so much pressure off me because normally I would have been overthinking all of those things that had happened, but then also like, what's my race plan? I need to prove these people wrong. I need to like make sure where am I going to make my move and how am I going to manage the weather? And can I do this all without the help of the coaches that typically, were the ones who got me to be good. And so that would have been the overthinking part, but it was more like, fuck it. I'm done. Just go out there and see what happens.
But so much was stacked against you. And that's why I feel like I love this book. I mean, we've heard little things here and there. I knew that you guys weren't in the best place, but reading it and then when you're in the moment and you're describing it, there's so much stacked against you. And reading the book and in your own words, describing that day at a really deep level, there were things that made me chuckle. Like when you were like, oh, I'm going to win. I should take this jacket off. Nope, I can't take my jacket off. Like you're so cold. It was just so cool being in your mind in those moments. When you cross that line, and obviously you've been asked this a million times, but I don't care. I love to hear it. When you cross that line, and yes, you and Josh and Ryan had your big hug, what did you feel the most? Was it relief? Was it joy? What was the main feeling you were having?
Total shock. Like, of all the days where you're like, I'm so ready for this. This is my moment. I'm going to win this year. I stood in the starting line. It was like, maybe I'll make it to 20K and step off and ride off into the sunset. Like, that's really where my mind was. And even, like, I'll help Shalane with this getting back to the group because, like, who cares? I'm going to step off around 20K or just jog in. And then it was it was completely polar opposite to 2011 where I pictured every little thing falling into place. Um, I just kept doing the wrong thing, ironically, and it was like things just kept falling into place. If there was ever a moment where I bought into divine intervention, that was it. I was just like, I can't believe this fucking happened. Like it was just surprising to me. It was a complete surprise. And I mean, I think I put my hands to my mouth and said, I can't believe that just fucking happened because it was so bizarre and not what I'd pictured at all. And it just sort of made me stop believing in everything I thought before. I'm like, oh, there's all kinds of ways to get this done.
And was it as good as you had dreamed? You had dreamed about it before 2011. You had come so freaking close. You had to wait 7 years to get it done. Was it everything you imagined it would be?
It really was. And I think it's all the close calls and heartbreaks that um, made it special, right? Like if I had won in 2011, I think I would have just checked out and been like, okay, well, that was easy. Like, what's next? I'm going to go into, I don't know, business. And so like it was the hard stuff that made it special. And, yeah. And like by that point, I feel like I had been to that race so many times that I had this connection with the community, and I knew everybody in the John Hancock program and, you know, the BAA, and it just felt it's so funny because that's the farthest away I had been from my team, but I felt so like I didn't feel alone at all in that moment. It was like there's this really amazing group of people again outside of just colorways where it's like, oh, everyone in John Hancock, everyone at BAA, like all the volunteers. And it was just this sort of community that I had built over many, many years. It was sad to not have the brothers um feel like they were a part of it. Um, you know, because it was our dream for a long time. So that was hard.
Yeah, you talk about how they one of them took a picture of you and you thought it was going to be a picture of you with them. And yeah, that made me sad for you that you couldn't have that moment of, we worked really hard to achieve this for a long time. But I'm glad that you had so many other people in your life that you don't even know. You don't even know that we're just so excited for you and happy for you. I have to know where your wreath is.
It is in northern Michigan on a dresser in the box. It's pretty dusty.
Epic.
It's a pretty dusty box.
I mean, that's just so epic. Like that is the laurel wreath with all of the history and you have it. And maybe, it's just in the box, but you have it and you earned it. Is I'm just wondering because that was something that I wanted so bad. Does it always feel real that you did that you won the Boston Marathon? Are you ever like, I can't believe that happened? Or are you like, no, I did that?
No, it never feels real. I'm usually like, I can't believe this is bizarre. And then you have to tell the story and remind yourself. Yeah, it was a wild, wild day. So
Okay, well, we're getting long here. I could talk to you forever. I literally didn't talk about like 5 things that I really wanted to talk about. So maybe we have to do a second episode. But if you I mean, I think everyone is going to buy your book, but let's just say someone's on the fence or someone was on the fence, they buy it and they read it. What do you hope that they take from it?
I think there's a lot of lessons in there. Like, I think people might read it and find a running story, but I hope they read it and find things that they can apply to their own life. You know, finding passion for what you do, not just going to work and going through the motions. You know, like for me, that was finding the love of the run. Um, Advocating for yourself. I feel like, you know, it's a big thing I learned from Josh is you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate, and know your worth, and then go negotiate and fight like hell for what you're worth. You know, those types of lessons. And I think they're it's a very thematic, like every chapter is like, you know, it's like outsider theme, business theme, um, getting like a relationships, like finding mentors. That's been so important. So yeah, I hope it's engaging and it's fun and people are like, this is a cool running story, but um, take away lessons that they can apply to their own life.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously winning Boston was a pretty big effing deal, but I think this book is going to help a lot of people. There's so many life lessons and there's so much inspiration, but there's also a lot of relatability. We've all been in situations where that you've gone through, just different strokes of life. And I think it's really relatable. And I'm excited for you. Well done. You did a great job and it's gonna touch a lot of people.
Thank you. Thanks for reading and for all the kind feedback and super questions. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's a wrap.